People ask a simple question. Did our ancient ancestors wear jewelry? Did they decorate themselves with feathers? The answer is yes, but it's a bigger story than that. It's not about fashion. It's about the moment we became us. It's about the evolution of the human mind. The first necklace wasn't just an object, it was an idea. It was the start of art, of language, of culture. It was a sign that a new kind of consciousness was waking up on the planet. To understand this, we need to go back, way back, before cities, before farming, before written words. We need to go back to a time when survival was everything, a time when a sharp rock and a warm fire were the greatest technologies on Earth. In a world like that, why would anyone spend time punching a hole in a seashell to hang around their neck? The answer to that question is the story of how we became human. It probably started with color. Before beads and pendants, there was pigment. The most important was red ochre. Ochre is a natural clay earth pigment. It's a soft rock rich in iron oxide. You can find it all over the world. Our ancestors found it too. They discovered that if you grind it up, you get a brilliant red powder. What did they do with this powder? They painted themselves. They painted their tools. They painted the walls of their caves. We find pieces of ochre at archaeological sites hundreds of thousands of years old. Some pieces have scrape marks on them showing they were processed, they were used. Red is a powerful color. It's the color of blood, it's the color of life, and also of death. It's the color of fire, the thing that kept them warm and safe in the dark. By covering themselves in red powder, they weren't just decorating. They were making a statement. They were connecting themselves to these powerful forces. They were saying something about who they were. This was the first step. The use of color shows an abstract thought. It shows that our ancestors could see one thing, red powder, and have it represent another thing, blood, life, power. This is symbolism, and symbolism is the foundation of everything that makes us different. But pigment washes away. The real breakthrough in personal adornment came with objects. Things you could hold. Things you could wear. The first solid evidence we have for this comes from Africa, the cradle of our species, Homo sapiens. In a place called Blombo's Cave on the coast of South Africa, archaeologists found something amazing. They found tiny sea snail shells. They were from a species called Necarius kraussianus. These snails don't live on the coast, they live in estuaries farther inland, so someone had to travel to get them, but that wasn't the most important part. Each of these shells, more than 40 of them, had a hole punched in it. The hole was in the exact same spot on every shell. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't damage from waves or rocks. Someone did this on purpose. When scientists looked at the shells under a microscope, they saw even more. They saw wear patterns around the holes, the kind of polish and smoothing you get when a string is passed through a hole and rubbed against it for a long, long time. They also found traces of red ochre on the shells. The story became clear. People gathered these shells. They carefully punched a hole in each one. They may have colored them with red ochre. Then they strung them together and wore them. They wore them as a necklace or a bracelet. How long ago did this happen? About 75,000 years ago. Think about that. Tens of thousands of years before the great cave paintings of Europe. This was not a primitive grunting caveman. This was a person with a modern mind. A person who took the time to create something beautiful, something meaningful. And it wasn't just at Blombo's Cave. We find similar evidence across Africa. In Morocco, shells were found that are even older, maybe 82,000 years old. In other places, we find pieces of ostrich eggshell broken and rounded into disc-shaped beads. This was a widespread behavior among early modern humans in Africa. It was part of their culture. So we know our direct ancestors, Homo sapiens, were making and wearing jewelry. But what about our cousins, the Neanderthals? For a long time, the scientific world had a very low opinion of Neanderthals. They were portrayed as brutish, dim-witted, and incapable of the kind of symbolic thought needed to make art or jewelry. They were the cavemen of the cartoons. We thought all the fancy stuff, art, music, decoration, was our invention, something Homo sapiens brought with them when they moved into Europe around 45,000 years ago. But we were wrong. The evidence has been building for years. Neanderthals were far more complex than we ever gave them credit for. And yes, they wore jewelry. One of the most powerful pieces of evidence comes from a cave in Croatia called Krpina. There, scientists found a set of white-tailed eagle talons, 8 of them. They were dated to about 130,000 years ago, long before modern humans were in Europe. These weren't just leftover bones from a meal. They had multiple cut marks and abrasions. They had been polished. They were clearly manipulated by tools. The researchers concluded they were part of a necklace or some other kind of ornament. An eagle is not a chicken. It's a powerful, impressive predator. To hunt one would have been difficult and dangerous. To wear its talons would have been a powerful statement. It would say, I am a great hunter. I have the power and spirit of the eagle. This wasn't just decoration, this was a symbol of strength and status. And then there are the feathers. Feathers are delicate. They rot and disappear over thousands of years, so finding direct evidence of feather use is almost impossible. But we can find indirect evidence. At Neanderthal sites, archaeologists have found bird bones, especially wing bones. What's strange is that they often find cut marks on the parts of the wing that have very little meat. Why would you butcher a part of the bird with no food on it? The answer is for the feathers. They were carefully cutting away the long, impressive flight feathers. We see this with birds that have striking plumage, like raptors and crows. They weren't just eating the birds, they were harvesting their feathers for decoration. Imagine a Neanderthal with dark, glossy raven feathers tied in their hair, or the giant feather of a vulture attached to their clothing. It's a completely different picture from the stooped, hairy brute we used to imagine. In Spain, at two different caves called Cueva de los Aviones and Cueva Anton, the evidence gets even stronger. These sites were used by Neanderthals around 50,000 years ago. Archaeologists found seashells, just like the ones in Africa. Some were naturally colored, like the vibrant orange scallop shell. Others had been painted with pigments. One shell, a cockle, was painted with a mix of red and yellow minerals. Another, a spondylus shell, had traces of red hematite on it. And most importantly, they had holes. They were perforated, ready to be hung on a string. This was a bombshell. It showed that Neanderthals were doing the exact same thing as modern humans in Africa at around the same time. They were collecting beautiful objects from the natural world. They were modifying them. They were coloring them, and they were wearing them. Symbolic behavior wasn't a Homo sapiens invention. It was a human invention, something that our shared ancestor might have even possessed in a simpler form. It seems both Neanderthals and modern humans developed this capacity independently or inherited a basic version of it. So we've established that they did it. Both early modern humans and Neanderthals decorated themselves. The next question, the big question, is why? Why go to all that trouble? Why spend time drilling a shell when you could be hunting or finding shelter? The answer is that these objects were not a luxury. They were essential. They were a tool just as important as a stone axe. But they weren't a tool for shaping the physical world. They were a tool for shaping the social world. First, it was about identity. In a world without writing or formal laws, how do you know who belongs to your group? How do you distinguish friend from stranger? Adornments could have been a key way to do this. Maybe my family wears necklaces made of wolf teeth. Your family, living in the next valley over, wears necklaces of deer teeth. When we meet, we instantly know who is who. It's a uniform, it's a badge of belonging. It reinforces the bonds within the group and defines the group to outsiders. This social glue would have been incredibly important for survival. Second, it was about sending signals. Personal ornaments are a form of communication. They can broadcast information about the wearer without a single word being spoken. A necklace of bear claws might signal that the wearer is a powerful and respected hunter. A certain type of shell might indicate that a person is of a certain age or is ready for marriage. It could signify a person's role in the group, like a shaman or a leader. This is a very efficient way to manage social interactions. It creates a shared language of objects, a system of meaning that everyone in the group understands. Third, it was about memory and story. Think about an object that is important to you. A ring from your grandmother, a watch from your father. It's not just a thing. It holds memories, it tells a story. Ancient jewelry could have worked the same way. Maybe a particular tooth was from the first bison a young hunter ever killed. Wearing it would be a constant reminder of that achievement, a physical piece of their personal history. Maybe a string of shells was a gift, a token of a bond between two people. These objects could have served as a kind of external memory, connecting people to their past, to their accomplishments, and to each other. They made life stories tangible. Fourth, it had a spiritual or magical dimension. For ancient people, the world was alive with spirits and unseen forces. Animals were not just meat, they were powerful beings with their own spirits. The ocean was not just water, it was a mysterious realm with its own power. By wearing a part of an animal, like a tooth or a claw, you might believe you were taking on some of its strength, speed, or cunning. It was an amulet. It was protection. A shell from the ocean might connect you to the spirit of the water. These weren't just pretty objects. They were charged with meaning and power. They were technology for navigating the spiritual world. And finally, we can't discount the simplest reason of all aesthetics. The human brain seems to be wired to appreciate beauty. We like symmetry. We like patterns. We like shiny, colorful things. Maybe on top of all the social and spiritual reasons, they also just thought these things looked good. The act of creating something beautiful, of making oneself look beautiful, can be a source of pleasure and satisfaction. It's a very human impulse. It's possible that this simple joy of creation was the seed from which all the other complex meanings grew. Let's look closer at the materials they chose. The choices weren't random. Each material brought its own story and its own power. Shells were incredibly popular, they are durable, so they survive in the archaeological record. They often have a natural luster or a beautiful shape. They are also connected to the ocean or to rivers, which were powerful and important parts of the ancient world. The ocean was a source of food, but also a vast, dangerous, and mysterious place. Wearing a piece of it could have been a way to connect with that power. The fact that we find marine shells at sites far inland shows how valuable they were. People carried them for huge distances or traded them from group to group. They were exotic goods. Teeth, claws, and bones were another major category. These were direct links to the animal world, but not just any animal. The most common sources were large predators and impressive prey. We find the teeth of bears, wolves, foxes, and lions. We find the talons of eagles. We find the teeth of deer, especially the canines, which have a pleasing curved shape. These weren't just animal parts, they were trophies. They were proof of a hunter's skill and bravery. To wear the tooth of a bear you killed was to carry the story of that dangerous encounter with you always. It was a testament to your ability to provide for and protect your family. It was a symbol of your mastery over the dangerous natural world. The feathers, as we've seen, were almost certainly a huge part of ancient adornment. They are lightweight, brilliantly colored, and can be easily attached to hair or clothing. Think of the iridescent sheen of a raven's feather, the stark black and white of a magpie, or the imposing size of a vulture's feather. They are also symbols of flight, of the sky, of a world beyond the reach of ground-dwelling humans. The evidence is indirect to the cut marks on bird bones, but it's compelling. The reason we don't find more jewelry made of feathers is simply because they don't last. The same is true for other organic materials like wood, seeds, or flowers. The ornaments we find, made of shell and bone and stone, are likely just a tiny fraction of what our ancestors actually wore. Their world was probably far more colorful and decorated than the archaeological record suggests. And then there's ochre again. It was used on its own as body paint, but it was also used to color other objects. Many of the ancient shell beads we find have traces of red ochre on them. It seems they were deliberately coated in the red powder. This added another layer of symbolism. Not only was the object itself meaningful, a shell from the sea, but it was also colored with the pigment of life and power, red ochre. It was a combination of powerful ideas in one small object. So how do scientists know all this? How can they look at a tiny 100,000-year-old shell and know it was worn as a bead? It comes down to a kind of archaeology that is a lot like forensic science. They use powerful microscopes to look for telltale signs of human activity. First, they look at the hole. Is it a natural break, or was it made by a tool? A tool, even a simple pointed stone, leaves a specific kind of mark. You can see the circular scratches in the shape of the perforation. Scientists even do experiments. They take modern shells and try to drill holes in them using replicas of ancient stone tools. Then they compare the marks on the experimental shells to the marks on the ancient ones. If they match, they have strong evidence that the hole was man-made. Second, they look for use wear. This is the polish and smoothing that happens when an object is used for a long time. If a shell was strung on a cord, the cord would rub against the edges of the hole. Over months or years, this constant friction would create a smooth, polished surface. Also, if the shells were part of a necklace, they would rub against each other and against the skin and clothing of the wearer. This creates a specific kind of surface polish that is different from the natural shine of a shell. By mapping these polished areas, scientists can reconstruct how the object was worn. Third, they look at the context. Where was the object found? Was it found with a burial suggesting it was a treasured possession laid to rest with its owner? Were many similar objects found together suggesting a complete necklace or bracelet that had broken? Was it found far from its source, like a seashell in a rock shelter hundreds of miles from the coast? All of these clues help build a case. Putting all of this together, we see a profound shift in the human story. The creation and use of these objects signals a cognitive leap. It's the moment when the brain became capable of fully modern symbolic thought. What does that mean? It means our ancestors could hold one idea in their mind and have it stand for another. A lion tooth is not just a lion tooth. It stands for strength, danger, and I am a great hunter. This is the exact same mental process we use for language. The word river is just a sound. It has no inherent connection to a flowing body of water, but we as a group have all agreed that this sound stands for that thing. It's a symbol. Jewelry may have been one of the first physical manifestations of this new symbolic ability. It was a way of creating a shared system of meaning, a culture. Before complex spoken language may have even developed, people could communicate complex ideas about identity, status, and belief through the things they wore. It was a language of objects. This ability to create and share symbols is what allowed Homo sapiens to build the world we live in today. It allowed us to form larger, more complex social groups. It allowed us to create rules, myths, and religions that could bind thousands of people together. It allowed us to plan for the future and remember the past. It allowed us to create art that could communicate emotions across generations. It all starts with that fundamental ability to see the world not just as a collection of things, but as a collection of signs. The first person who looked at a shell and saw not just a shell, but a message, was taking the first step on the road to civilization. So, when we look at a simple string of shells in a museum, recovered from a dusty cave, we are not looking at a primitive trinket. We are looking at one of the most important inventions in human history. We are looking at the birth of the symbolic mind. We are seeing the physical evidence of a new way of being in the world. This wasn't something that happened overnight. It was a slow, gradual process that likely began with the simple use of pigments like ochre and evolved over hundreds of thousands of years. But by the time we see Neanderthals wearing eagle talons and modern humans stringing shell beads, the transition was well underway. The human mind was no longer just a tool for survival in the physical world. It had become a tool for creating a world of shared meaning. So yes, they wore jewelry. They wore feathers, they painted their bodies red, and in doing so they were doing more than just decorating. They were thinking abstractly, they were building social networks, they were telling stories. They were creating culture, they were becoming us. Every piece of jewelry you wear today, every choice you make to express your identity through your appearance, is part of a tradition that is hundreds of thousands of years old. It is a faint echo of that ancient revolutionary moment when one of our ancestors first picked up a feather, or a shell, or a tooth, and decided it meant something. That was the moment we truly began to evolve.